Hi, Sunny. Welcome to the Buy, Grow, Sell podcast.
Thanks for having me.
My pleasure indeed. I've been really looking forward to unpacking your story, actually. You've got a really interesting background. And I've had a few guys on the show that have had a military background and then gone into the whole entrepreneurial space. And, clearly you've gone on to this next level with, an investment company and all sorts of really interesting things. But maybe we could go back to the sort of beginning and kind of what led you to ultimately getting into business.
Yeah, so I think what led me into getting in business must have been almost genetic. I was the kid in the neighborhood that was, selling lawn mowing jobs and finding the other kids to actually do the work. And like the early like family origin stories at Thanksgiving are all these funny stories of me as a 12-year-old with a bike repair shop. And so I don't really know. It was just what got my attention. Um, and interestingly, I noticed even later in life, when I was running Data Return, Tish and I would go on vacation. And I'm in Jamaica, and we're passing the first big container yard I'd ever seen in person. And I got curious, and I'm like, well, how does that work? And how do they make money? And who are their customers? And all of these things. So I don't know. I think it's just who I am.
Yeah. That's cool. I love, what I'm hearing here too is this curiosity of the mind. This, it's a trait that I see a lot with successful entrepreneurs. This curiosity about how do things work and what are the problem and how do this get solved. So I've got to ask the obvious question. Like being an entrepreneur is kind of very open-ended and uncertainty, fluidity. You could probably use 100 adjectives here, but what then led you to go into the military? Because seemingly that would have been very, very regimented and controlled, and they almost seem like opposite ends of the spectrum.
Yeah. So I started college pretty early. I was 16 when I started college, and after a year of that, I realized like that was not at all for me. Like what I thought I was going to get out of college. Undergrad chemistry is not exciting, not even a little bit. And so I just wanted to go do the thing that was as far away from what I was doing as I could imagine, and maybe kind of the hardest thing I could imagine.
Yeah.
And one of the misnomers about all of the military is that it's very regimented.
Okay.
I probably would have been thrown out of the regular army because I say stuff like I have an out loud voice. I was fortunate enough to be too stubborn to quit when I went through Ranger selection. So I ended up as an Army Ranger, and that environment was very fluid, very entrepreneurial. Everything changed all the time. Very high performance team. So the because I said so kind of military stuff, we didn't have a lot of that.
Yeah. Okay.
We had a lot of peak performance, accomplish the mission, those kinds of things. Like the core values were very much around accomplish the mission, not around follow every rule. And interestingly, they were smart enough to be able to dig into the psyche of who could make it. Because when we had dumb army stuff, they always gave us a good reason. Like they'd kind of call us in, they're like, okay, y'all, look, we're about to have to do army stuff. And I know you don't like it, and I don't like it either, but here's why we're going to do it. So let's do it Ranger style and be better than anybody else, even at the dumb army stuff. And so what would we do? Well, we can do that too. And we would do it, and then it would be over, and we could go back to doing our, black helicopter stuff. So that environment, I like really thrived in that environment. Regular army, because I said so, I don't know if that would have ended very well.
Yeah. I get it. I do get it. I've had family and friends in the military and everything else, and it's interesting to see the different sort of personality types and how they might react in different scenarios. It leads me also to one of the interesting thing that sort of popped up in a conversation recently where I was asked. I was asked about what's one of the key features for people getting into business. Like, what's one of the key traits they need to be comfortable with to be successful? And what I answered at the time, and this is probably one of just many, was the ability to deal with uncertainty. This whole idea that, well, you don't necessarily know if you've got the right idea or whether it will be successful or how clients will respond to things or whatever it might be, but you're okay with the uncertainty because you know you're heading in the right direction, and you'll be flexible, you'll adjust, you'll evolve as you go. And I stated that as one of the things I thought was important. But what are your thoughts around that?
I think uncertainty, I often use the word ambiguity.
Yep.
Right. Most of the things that make it to our desk, they're not black and white. If they were, they never would have made it to the desk. And then in the early days, the willingness to sign up to deliver something that you're sure that your organization can deliver, but you've never done it before.
Yeah.
That instinct of can I find the right balance metaphorically between the engineering crowd, the product crowd, and the sales and marketing crowd, and being able to go, oh, we can definitely do that. Yeah, it's going to be great. And I would regularly go back. So let me back up. My first company, we started when I was 23. Quit Microsoft at the time. Best job in the country. Everybody thought we were crazy. We were broke 20-year-olds eating ramen, talking about this internet thing was going to change the world.
Yep.
Turns out it did, and we had a good business out of it. But the early days, so I had this amazing CTO, this guy named Jason, and Jason could do nearly anything. If it was possible, he could probably figure it out. So I took that as a license to go tell customers yes. I was like, yeah, we can do that. And so I would come home, and literally, Jason and I were roommates too.
Yeah.
So I would come home, and I'd be like, hey, Jason, you'll never guess what I sold today. And he'd slam the door and yell, and he'd be mad, rightly so, because I signed us up for the impossible.
Yeah.
But I had trust in his capabilities and ultimately in the team that we built at the company to actually figure it out. And because of where we were in the environment, no one had ever done these things before. So it wasn't like the customers weren't also tolerant of, yeah, it took us a little longer to figure it out. So that not just being able to tolerate uncertainty or ambiguity, but actually thriving in it, leaning into this ambiguity of, I don't know how this is going to play out. Yeah. Let's go, right? And to find some joy in it. And importantly, to, if you're going to have a spouse, my advice would be to have a spouse that can hang with this stuff too. It gets a little she's come close to writing a book about the journey too. She and I met and started dating the same month I started my first company. 25 years ago. So yeah, that ambiguity, because what we're trying to do is shape a new reality out of this ambiguity. It's fuzzy and there's no focus and no one can see. And what are we doing? We're making a new reality. So if everything's crystal clear, maybe there's no opportunity for us.
Yeah, that's interesting. That whole risk versus reward, right? It's they're counterbalance, right? If there was no risk in it, there would be no reward. It'd be worth nothing because anybody could do it. But it's interesting, that ability to lean in and thrive in uncertainty. How much of that do you think is a personality trait that you're born with versus something that can be taught or learned?
Like most things, it's certainly a bit of both, and probably not so much born with, but who were your friends growing up, and what were your parents like, and what lessons did you get? I was very fortunate to have a pretty stable life growing up, so I didn't worry for stuff like food. That just wasn't. I just not a thing. Now when I got in the Rangers, I worried about food all the time. I was hungry and it's cold, but it. So I think if you are comfortable with sort of who you are and where you are in the world, you're more likely to be able to take what looks like risk to other people.
Yes,
as well. But I do think it's a learnable skill. It's like anything. Something you're afraid of, immersion therapy kind of works. Not for everybody, but it kind of works. You get a little bit higher and a little bit higher, or maybe you can hold the spider now, whatever your thing happens to be. If you take risks that you're uncomfortable with and you get some reward out of it, or even if it's just not reward, it just turned out to not be catastrophic.
Yeah, you didn't die.
Yeah, you didn't die. So maybe you can do it again.
Yeah.
I do think there is a bit of the optimist versus pessimist bias that helps a lot here. The willingness to believe the best of the world, like that things are going to be okay.
Yep.
I think that helps a lot too.
Yeah. It's you're ringing the bell for me so many times already in this chat. It's I know with our company we jump into lots of different projects from time to time, and it's I was saying to one of the ladies in our team that she said, "Oh, geez, I've never done this sort of thing before," and I said, "Yes, but you're a smart person and you have the ability to ask questions. And if you get it wrong, nobody's going to die. There's no dinosaur chasing you here. So don't. There's nothing to be afraid of here." And I think that with your ability to explore things and your level of intelligence, you'll work it out. You'll work it out. So don't freak out about this. It's not a problem. It's new, yes, but pretty soon you'll be through this and it won't be new anymore. And so life's a change in a modern society, right? Like it's not everything is on the line with every single thing we do, and our lives are under threat. That whole fight or flight kind of mechanism is still active, but it's probably not as required in the environment we live and work in these days.
That's not a T-Rex. That's a customer.
Yeah,
it's going to be okay, right?
Yeah, exactly. So, Sonny, I'm curious. One of the other things, other than an individual or an entrepreneur's ability to deal with ambiguity, one of the other kind of common traits I see a lot of is that successful people have had either one or numerous really great mentors or big influences in their life that have either helped them through a challenge or have just been consistently there for them. Has there been anyone like that in your life?
Yeah. I'll start with nearly everybody. Like I learned so much from the people around me. This is back to the curiosity. Like there's all these people with these amazing gifts. What can I learn? Um, the people that I learned how to express love and compassion from, just as important
Yeah.
as some business tactic about how to sell and how to organize marketing and all these other things. So I find that we have lessons everywhere all the time. And like, don't miss the opportunity to take the learning from nearly anybody. And I've had some critical moments along the way. So that's sort of broadly on the positive side. On the it just got deep and it's a little scary moment. I've certainly had my share of those too. And I can think of two specific conversations and one just sort of general, like back to my comment about the spouse, like I just got lucky on this front because she's always been like, whatever you want to do makes you happy. I'm totally cool with it. I just want you to be happy and I'm here for you.
Yep.
And it's like, she really means it. So that's awesome. Like I just have that, like, so my risk profile of, oh, it didn't go very well. She's like, well, that sucks. What are you going to do about it?
Yeah.
Like, oh, okay. So that's been like this constant. There were two conversations that come to mind in addition to that when you ask about it. So one, the context for me going into the Rangers, like, so I was a computer science major, and I look like a computer science major. Like I smoked 2 packs of cigarettes a day. I ate, pizza and drank beer, and exercise was like walking to class when I went. Like I was in bad shape, not just like average shape. I was in bad shape. So I go in the military, I'm in boot camp, and I'm like barely keeping up.
Yeah.
And I was pretty intellectual in high school. I wasn't playing sports. I was outside all the time, but certainly wasn't in the gym all the time. And I remember that moment where I was just like week after week of just barely keeping up. And this was just like plain old infantry basic training, kind of general conditioning. And I went to one of the drill sergeants and I was like, "Hey, look, now, I didn't use these words. I'm going to paraphrase. I get punched for these words. I was like, "Hey, look, man, like I don't know how this is going to go because I'm just barely keeping up with this regular army stuff. Like maybe this whole ranger thing was a goofy pipe dream and I just need to let it go." And he looked over at me and he goes, "Well, it hadn't killed you yet." I'm like, "No, I guess it hasn't." And he goes, "Well, why don't you just keep going until you can't go anymore? And I was like, okay, I can do that. And guess what? I just kept going until I couldn't go anymore. And I looked up and I'm in the Rangers and I'm in charge of people and we get cool black helicopter stuff. And like, it was awesome. And
Yeah,
all I had to do was just like keep going. And that, like that entrepreneurial moment, like that's there all the time. It is only people who have made payroll understand what it's like. Like it's a
100%.
binary thing. It's either on you or it's not on you. I think generally people don't understand how many days there are where you just have to figure out what's the next thing I can do and do that. Because if you think about the big picture, it's too much.
Yeah,
You just can't hang with it. So I think that bit of like momentary mentorship that lives with me forever. Well, just keep going and don't give up was very useful. And I had another one. Along the way, we took that company public, and I was CEO of a public company in my 20s, which was that's its own story and podcast, wildness. Um, and then half our customers disappeared, and we were 90 days from profitability, but then it turned into a mess. And like,
was this
so I've got
data
this.
return? Was
Yeah, this was data
Yeah.
returns. This is
Okay,
my
cool.
first. So like utter chaos going on. We're public. Like I've had no tools or skills for this, and we grew 40% a quarter for 3.5 years.
So give me some context around this, because people are hearing this company, we've jumped from Rangers into this business and it's public. It's like, wow. Like, so in a nutshell, I mean, how did that start? Did you start it on your own? Were there founders? What did the first couple of years
Yeah.
look like?
So I started it with a couple of co-founders from Microsoft. We were all good at different things, which turned out really well. And I was the CEO. And our business, to paraphrase, was mission critical web infrastructure.
Yep.
So if our customers were people like H&R Block online tax filing. They make all of their money in 4 days out of the year.
Yep.
The day everybody gets their W-2 that's going to get a return, and the couple of days around the 15th when everybody can't file their taxes any later. And if it breaks during that, like it could be 20 or 30% of their income.
Wow.
So very high stakes web facing applications, surgical scheduling, insurance processing, like that kind of stuff, and generally on technologies that were just released that barely work. So that was where we fit in the world. Um, so that we hit a spot where there was a big need for that, and so we grew revenue 40% every quarter.
Wow.
So we doubled headcount like every 120 days for years.
Jeez. That
Like,
just sounds like an HR nightmare to me. How do you, as a company, deal with that kind of growth?
um, yeah, how do you deal with that kind of growth? A high bar on hiring helps. I tried the opposite. Don't do that. It doesn't work.
Yeah.
You end up with some new rules, like you're not allowed to have teams where everybody in the entire team has been at the company for less than 90 days. Like, ask me how I learned that rule. I went in this group and I'm like, what are y'all doing? This is like literally the opposite of the way we're organized to do this and our strategy. And they're like, well, where we all came from, that's how we did it. And you're like, okay, this is on me. Like, I should have anticipated this problem. Part of it is being willing to hire extraordinary people. So there was a moment where I met somebody who was this old gray hair. He must have been like 40 or something like that. He was ancient.
So old.
Right. And he had a little gray. I'm like, oh my God, this is like grandpa. Like, but he'd done like 5 early stage businesses. And it was just one of those, like, somebody up in the universe somewhere is looking out for me. The sales line rang and it was late, but I was still there because welcome to be an entrepreneur. And I picked it up and I started chatting with this guy who was talking about being a customer. And we just sort of hit it off. And it turns out he was local and he helped me build a business plan. Now, we already had a business, but we just didn't have a business plan. We just kind of felt our way into it. And long story short, at the end of it, we ended up giving him a big chunk of the company and paid him more than all 3 founders combined.
Wow.
Well, oh my God, that's crazy talk. You should never do that. Don't give any of your equity away, and people shouldn't cost that much. That one move repeated over and over again of find extraordinary people who know what they're doing and let them do it and provide the container for them and coaching and vision and strategy. And there are places where you'll have something unique to add. But if your executive team is not teaching you, you've underhired.
Yeah.
There are things I can teach them, but and I'm talking about their discipline. My, leader of marketing, this chief marketing officer, should be on the whiteboard teaching me how to do marketing.
Yeah.
And if it's the inverse, we've lost the thread here. So we repeated accidental success a bunch of times, and turns out it wasn't accidental. Like that's a pattern of extraordinary people get extraordinary outcomes. What do you have to do to get them? I was in conversation with a CEO the other day, and we're in the investment business, so I spend most of my time talking to other CEOs of good-sized companies. And the conversation we were having, I was asking this question. I said, what if you could have one of the 10 best people in the country for this job? And it was apparent in that conversation that wasn't part of the consideration set. Like their mind was not open to the idea of, no, I could do a nationwide search and pick out of the top 10, there's going to be a best fit for the stage and size and culture and all those things. One of the best 10 people in the country. And but no one had ever said to them, you can want that.
Yeah. Which is a funny thing, because I think, we all talk, I think, in business and life about decide what the end game should look like. What's the goal? And then we work backwards, right? So if the end game is we want the absolute best people, I mean, it's funny. I just think that thinking seems to be quite common among a lot of business owners and executives, but we don't necessarily apply it in all situations where we should.
That's right. I had two friends, one of whom was an extraordinary fit for an executive position at the other friend's company. And the incoming executive called me and said, I'm not taking the job. I'm like, what are you doing, man? You're perfect for this. He said, he won't give me any equity. And I called the other friend and I'm like, what are you doing? Like, this guy's perfect for this job. And he's like, yeah, I'm just not, I own all the equity. I'm not giving him any equity. And I'm like, you realize, like, if you want one of the best in the country, they're going to want equity. Like, just given the nature of the role. And I know I'm being a little sketchy. I'm trying to protect both friends. Like the right candidate won't take the work without some sort of equity upside.
Yeah.
And it just wasn't their style. They're like, no, I'm going to keep it and own it. And I understand. That pattern has not worked for me. The pattern that's worked for me has been whatever I have to do to get extraordinary people, get as many of them as I can.
Yep.
I had these moments at Data Return where people would come to me, and I was proud of these moments. I was like, this means we nailed it. I was the smartest person at the last place I worked, and it wasn't even close. And I don't know what to do here because I'm having a hard time keeping up.
Yeah.
And I'm like, yeah, everybody. I was just telling them, I go, like, everybody feels the same way. Everybody's like, oh my God, these people are amazing. I got to go harder.
Yeah.
I got great people. I repeated myself a lot about what's our culture, what's our strategy, what makes us different, what are we trying to accomplish in the world. And look, it starting an internet company in 1996, they thought we were crazy. Like, everybody thought we were nuts. So part of it was just go, well, it was timing. Yeah, it was timing. And I was willing to eat some glass for 3 years waiting for the rest of the world to catch up.
Yeah. Yeah. I still remember 96 being at university with my friend saying, have you heard about this internet thing? And we went to a computer in the library where I was having to still borrow books and take them out to write my assignments. And it was so basic at the time, but it was like, I was sitting there going, oh, but what do you use it for? Like, I mean, at the time I could not wrap my head around where this might go, in terms of the opportunity that it presented. But it was a fascinating time. And of course that led into the big .com bubble bursting, all the rest of it. So how did that sort of piece of history play out in your story?
Yeah. So it was pretty rough. So that was about half of our customer base, right? So I would say our customers were generally the world's 1,000 largest companies and the world's 1,000 largest internet companies for different reasons, but we were a good fit. That was kind of that 2,000 was our hunting base. So the half that were internet companies, a lot of them had economic problems really fast, sort of over that period of time. So we had to reorganize our world and figure out how to get where we were going. And tuning up a business to get to profitability is not the same as you've built a machine that generates 40% growth and doubling of headcount every 120 days. And it does that very well, like clockwork. Every quarter, we got these results. And then the world shifted so much and so fast that it was just like, it all stopped. We were 90 days away from profitability.
Wow.
And, we still had some money. And we had actually had a deal arranged with one of our investors. So one of our investors was Compact Computer Company. We shared a board member, deep cultural fit. Our technical teams were integrated with theirs, and they were going to acquire us. It was the perfect deal. And the same weekend that deal was supposed to close and get announced, instead, Hewlett-Packard and Compaq merged, and our deal was off. That was
Can I ask a quick question there? Because and this is clearly a major part of the history of this business and your journey. But I'm just curious, the relationship with Compaq. You said it was obviously a really good fit. When you first started engaging with Compaq in whatever form that was, did you have in your mind that they could be a good acquisition partner or a good merger partner, however you wanted to frame the transaction? But was that in your mind back in those days? Did you feel that kind of synergy early on, or was it something that evolved over time?
Yeah, with 40% quarterly growth, there's no time for thinking about anything but 40% quarterly growth. And look, to be like really clear about this, we didn't start the business for money. We started it because we had to. It was just literally like couldn't sleep, would wake up every morning. It was all you could think about, completely consumed. Same reason I started the current business.
Yep.
You couldn't help it. So we weren't really thinking about economics and all that stuff. As we had been public for a while, started to become in the conversation. And sort of watching how the world was developing, it was clear to us that our business was a better fit as part of another company. Like that was the real learning.
Okay.
So no advance. They were a stakeholder. They were a part of our ecosystem already. We were raising capital. We also raised capital from Microsoft and from Level 3, a big communications company, because like those were the big players in our ecosystem. And I had this piece of advice that the short version was always make your shadow bigger than you are. And there's a lot to unpack in that. And it was everything from branding to product positioning. Like we could talk for 3 hours about that, but it was one of those like put it on the wall, engrave it. Having Compaq and Microsoft and Level 3 as investors in a new Wild West territory where there were no leaders and nobody really knew what the hell was going on brought a tremendous amount of credibility. When I walked into a room at a Fortune 50 company and I said, these are our investors, people went, okay, they're real, checkbox. And they moved on from well, who are these people?
Yeah.
And that was really important in that stage, particularly given that they were giving us their most mission critical stuff. And they needed to not know we were still running out of the bottom floor. When we upgraded from the little one room in the rent house, we moved to a house I bought, and our business, we had like 10 employees on the bottom floor of the house with no air conditioner. This is real bootstrappy, guys.
Yeah.
Actually, I remember when our president, Michelle, went rogue. We made it to July in Texas. She went rogue. She said she was going to lunch. She really drove to Home Depot and bought an air conditioner. We didn't want to spend the money on it because every dollar we spent on marketing worked. Yes. We were like, let's just spend everything. More ramen, no air conditioning, get more marketing. like you're 24 or something. You can do that stuff.
Yeah, yeah,
So anyway, so the real driver was they were a major stakeholder for us, and good to have in our ecosystem. So that deal blew up because that happens all the time in deals.
yep,
And I think if we had run that deal a little harder and really understood this idea that time kills deals,
yeah,
and we had been ready a week earlier, probably would have closed
yeah,
for $1
yeah.
billion.
I just want to pick up that point again because it's something that I say a lot as well. Time kills deals, and I just people don't. I think unless you've been through a transaction, and particularly one that has actually failed, it's hard to understand the importance of that one line. And it's from all parties' perspective, right? People get deal fatigue. The longer it goes, the more reasons people find to sink the deal or have problems or kick up a stink about something that's, just it is such a critical factor for anybody listening to this who's thinking about selling their company one day. Well, actually, rather than me stating this, Sonny, maybe I can ask you, like, you've done a lot of deals, you've been through them yourself. How do you manage that? How do you, if you're thinking of selling your company, what are some of the critical factors so that time doesn't kill your deal?
Well, I think part of it is to understand um, that everybody needs to have a sense of urgency, and there is some dimensions of it, the sort of internal factors you mentioned, um, but I think the exogenous shocks happen more often than we realize, right? So no one would have told you public company A is buying public company B, and they've been a shareholder for most of the company's lifetime, and they share a board member, and there's a single document remaining to be signed. One more signature, and the deal is closed. No one would have said, well, you need to hurry up, because what if they change their mind? Like that, they're a big company. Like that ship has sailed. What you can't deal with is system shocks. You can't anticipate them, you can't predict them, you don't know what's going to happen when they show up. So think about the people that got their deal closed the week before COVID started shutting things down.
Oh, yeah.
Just 1 week. And the people that didn't, and it was going to happen next week, but then the news and, well, the airlines are closed, and then people start to get scared, and then they should go, we should wait. And it's rational for them to want to wait. Like, what does this mean? What do we do? So I actually have more concern about the exogenous shocks, that just every bit of time that goes by, some random stuff can come your way.
Yeah.
Because what you also have to do is to not try to hurry things up, right? If you run too fast, you end up focusing only on economic factors. You skip over lots of detail in both directions, and maybe you get your deal done and hate yourself.
Yeah.
Like, one of the things I talk about in my book. So, just for context, I wrote a book called "Selling Without Selling Out: How to Sell Your Business Without Selling Your Soul," because I did it wrong the first time, got it kind of right the second time. I'm in the business now, like trying to get good outcomes. So there's a ton of lessons learned. Like the first time that we actually got a deal done, we didn't really do any reverse diligence on the buyer. We just sort of believed the narrative that was out in the world about the buyer, and it turned out to not be true at all. Well, we got 20% of another public company was the form of the transaction. We got basically big slug of their company. And then we really got in detail, and we're like, wow, okay, this is not a culture fit. We don't like the way they execute. We're worried about X, Y, and Z, and the way they conduct themselves is the opposite of us. But we're like one of the biggest shareholders in the company now. Like, what do we do? So this is not about going too fast either. You try to close the thing in a week.
Yeah.
But I've seen occasionally in our business, somebody's like, okay, so I sent you the financials, let's close in 2 weeks. And I'm like, no. Like there is a set of steps. So I'm going to give you a couple of things. So one, get ready in advance. Before you go to actually do something, you got to get organized. The more organized you are, the better your process, whether your process is a formal process or an informal process, is going to go. if every time a potential buyer or investor asks you a question, it takes you 3 weeks to get an answer, that's a problem. That's going to drag your thing out over a really long period of time. And it's going to cost you a chip every time you do that. Because they're like, why don't I have this document yet? All I asked for was a sales pipeline and it's been weeks. Like that should be a 24-hour turnaround.
Yeah.
Come to find out they don't have one because they don't do pipeline. And now they're trying to build it, but they don't really know what one is. And then they give you a list of leads, not a sales pipeline. And now you're like, well, wait a minute. I thought this thing had revenue. Well, tell me again why revenue's growing. And like you create a bunch of problems for yourself. So you got to get ready in advance and get really organized in advance, and set aside some time to deal with the back and forth. So this is like, for lack of a better metaphor, there's a little bit of Goldilocks in this. If you try to rush it,
Yeah.
you can get some bad outcomes, or you can freak the other side out. Just don't foot drag. Like get this thing done. It's 90 to 120 days is how long it ought to take. At least for our size stuff. So we've an investment business. We invest in companies in the U.S. that are 8 to 50 million in profit. So these are decent sized businesses. Probably generally 40 to 500 million in revenue, kind of in that range. That's about how long one of those things take. If they're buying, if one of our portfolio companies is buying a company that's 7 million in revenue and $1 million of profit, like it shouldn't take 90 days. There's just fewer things to figure out.
Yep.
So I'll pause there.
Yeah, no, that's cool. I think you've sort of touched on a few things there around how to manage that process, but also a little bit of expectation on how long it should take. It's funny, whenever we've sold businesses, I say to all of our prospective clients, you've got to give me up to 12 months. Like we might get it done in a couple of months. We could get it done in 6 months, but in your mind, allow for the fact that this process, you haven't started yet. There's going to be a prep phase. We're going to be getting organized. We need to build out the campaign. We want to go to market. There's early discussions. Like I say, if we get it all done and wrapped up in 6 months, happy days. But there's a due diligence process in there as well. So it's so much of this, I think, is for business owners who have never been through it. They don't understand what a typical process looks like or should look like. And so having the right expectation, and it is important for them to then be able to manage their emotion. And I think that's actually one of the things that causes people to come unstuck. It's, we had a client just the other day even who a husband and wife team, and one of the couple were getting frustrated, saying, look, this is taking too long. It's these buyers seem to be, and there was a back and forth on it. And said, look, okay, hang on a second, I get it, you're feeling frustrated, but we're actually 7 months into a process, and we've only actually been on the market for a couple of months. Like really, like we prepped, we waited a little bit because of the timing. We pulled the trigger. These guys are actually, they're probably a week or so behind where we want them to be, but they're actually not that far out. So how do you manage all that emotion? And we're doing all this all the time with business owners, just holding their hand really and assuring them that they're actually on the right path. There might be a few potholes, but yeah, it's such an interesting thing. And I'm curious from your perspective, Sunny, like having been through that yourself and probably had a couple of sleepless nights, how important is it for you to be able to connect with buyers or people on the other side of the table now as an acquirer? Is this an important thing? How do you help manage the emotions of the people that, on the other side of the deals you're doing?
Yeah. So let me give just a little bit of context for like, hey, what do I do as a day job today? So sold it to the wrong people the first time. 12 months later, they filed for bankruptcy. But I had a bunch of stock. That's not cool. Bought it back. Like, unbelievable story. Way more stress than I needed in my life. Bought it back, ran it for another 4 years, found the right acquirer for it, sold it in May of 2007, and had been business dating somebody named Randy Eisenman. And by business dating, like, we just met and like he was a CEO and I was a CEO and we're just like, we like you, I like you. Like we had no idea what was going to happen. We're just like, we should spend some more time together. And we both had a deep sense of caring about things like values and culture. And we met because of a leadership course, a Stagen leadership course. So we spent a couple hours together for years complaining because like entrepreneurs complain a lot. Like if you actually know them, we're serial complainers. Um, but we'll do something about it too. And that's what happened. Like Randy and I are complaining about these capital guys and these venture people and private equity and Wall Street. And we just bitched about it for years. And as entrepreneurs do, finally we're like, well, let's do something about it. And that was the birth of Satori at this table in some little small town at a Chili's restaurant that was in between our two offices. Um, what if we could build the investment firm that we wanted to take capital from? And that was the genesis of Satori Capital, which we launched in 2008. So imagine in 2008 we start a business and we're saying crazy things like culture matters and not everything that creates value fits on a P&L and long-term perspective matters and maybe we should look at our environmental footprint if we're a manufacturer and just crazy stuff like that. It was crazy enough. So Randy and I had both been very successful. I'd had great exits. Randy had also been an investor for a while at Goldman Sachs. We took this story to Wall Street and we're like, we can see clearly we have this idea around conscious capitalism and stakeholders and an ecosystem of business and long-term holding and blah, blah, blah. And we told this story to Wall Street and the pension funds and all that. And it wasn't even like we got a no. We got polite chuckles and head pats. Like it patted us on our, oh, that's so sweet. And fortunately, we had been through this ride before because I did, an internet company in '96. Randy's claim to fame was he started an app store for the Nokia phones and Blackberries and Palm Pilots, like before the iPhone launched. So he was like 2000 to 2007. And Randy is like this masterful guy at timing. He sold that business the same quarter Apple launched an iPhone, which
Wow.
like just I don't know, man, the luckiest guy on the planet or the smartest guy on the planet. So we're running around telling the story, and people are like laughing at us, and it didn't hurt our feelings. We're just like, okay, seen this movie before, and so we were just like patient and kept chugging away at it and chugging away at it, and that was really the essence of it. It was like, what if we could be the private equity firm that we as entrepreneurs would be excited about taking capital from? So to your point about expectation setting, we do a lot of like, look, here's how this works. And then like these things are going to happen in this order. We send people a project plan with who owns what and not the, 700-page version of it, but like it fits on a page. Here's what's going to happen and here's what order. Sometimes we tell them, hey, about this week is when you're going to start to be irritated at us because we're asking a bunch of questions and you have two jobs. Like we'll tell them straight up, you're going to have two jobs because you got to run this business and don't forget to keep running the business. But we're curious. And one of the things I think that's helped us is we talk to people about like, what's our job? Like we're a steward of capital for other CEOs. Because that's, by the way, the punchline here, the Wall Street crowd never figured us out, but we went and talked to our CEO friends and they're like, that sounds great. Here's money. It's our job to figure out, is this business something that we should invest in, that it is what everybody says it is? Like that's literally our job, is to ask questions and to get proof. And that helps a little bit. But we'll say, yeah, it's about week 4, maybe week 5, when you're going to be tired of another status call on, our 17 questions that maybe have never been asked before. But our objective is, if we get diligence right, on the day we close, we're ready to be a good partner for you. We know enough to actually be useful to you. Because I don't like capital that's just a hitchhiker. John Mackey said this once, and it really stuck with me, that a lot of capital is just a hitchhiker. They show up, put money in, they get part of the company, and then they just go along for the ride. I'm like, no, we actually got to do some work. So the more we can explain the process and anticipate like this is coming, and I've been there myself twice. That seems to help, but it doesn't make it go away.
Yeah, yeah. How important is it? I mean, I've seen some bad advisors out there, whether they're representing legal, financial, commercial, we've seen them all. But I've also seen the polar opposite of that. I've seen amazing people on the other side of the table. How important is it from your perspective? Um, if the other team have really good advisors, is that going to increase the chances of success of the deal? How important is it that they've got a good team around them?
Yeah. So the worst thing we can get is bad advisors. As a buyer, when the seller's got bad advisors, um, because often, and it's bad for the seller too. And I'll use the legal example. I'm really clear in my book. You don't need an attorney. You need an M&A attorney because
Yes.
it's a specialized discipline, and there are things in there that sort of everybody's agreed to. I don't know how working capital works or how fundamental reps work or something like that. And we've been in these situations where the deal couldn't close because their advisor was telling them something that bluntly their advisor like didn't understand. If their advisor had called their M&A person inside their firm, they'd have been, oh no, that's how that works. And uh, I'm actually going to give you a specific example because this whole fundamental, like if I could put more content in my book, like I would put an appendix about fundamental reps.
Yes.
It's a thing, and people get really torqued out about it. And fundamental reps means stuff like you own the company, and like that's the big one. Like you own the company, and there's no fraud. And
Yes.
if you don't own the company, I can get all the money back because you don't own the company. And this poor guy, like his attorney, got him all spooled up about, well, what if you ask for all the money back? I'm like, okay, but that only happens if you don't own the company. As long as you own the
Yes.
company, we're good. Um,
Yes.
anyway, like this fundamental reps thing is if you've got a good advisor, they're like, here's exactly how this works. Stop talking about this. What we should talk about is this other issue about a knowledge qualifier or something like that. And
Yeah.
so I've seen over and over again the bad advisors still do as much work, as many hours. It's just on all the wrong things.
Yeah.
And by the
Yeah.
way, I don't think like we're not incented. We don't get a better deal when there's bad advisors. Like it's just harder, and you end up fighting over goofy
Yeah.
stuff. Um,
And probably more likely to fail, right? It's one of those things. Everyone spends all this time and effort and money and to have them fall over because you've just got people agitating. And I've seen a few instances where we've had the buyer, and we've done a number of cross border transactions, so it adds a different element of taxes and all sorts of different things. And um, you have the foreign company hires a local guy to do financial due diligence, and sometimes those advisors, they've actually never built their own businesses ever before. They're almost accounting purists, and they want to see everything exactly how the theory lays it out. And if it's slightly different, or if they report in a slightly different way, they miss the commerciality of the arrangement and just agitate around, they fixate on things that actually aren't necessarily that important. Like the buyer has the information. Yes, maybe they want to put in a new ERP system when they buy it or whatever, but it's funny to see what people focus on, and sometimes it really is not that important in the deal.
yeah, it's very common. Um,
Yeah.
I think while we're on this topic of focus, this question that that was really central to my book is this: what's most important?
Yeah.
It's very easy to get distracted by 1,000 small things in the deal, and sometimes they'll get under your skin. Like it's happened to me. I see it happen with entrepreneurs. It happens even when we're doing exits, where there's just some little tier 2 or tier 3 thing that gets under your skin and just starts to bug you. And then you wake up the next day and it's bugging you more and bugging you more. And the antidote to that is to figure out what you actually care about and to do that before you go into this thing and to get
Yeah.
clear enough to get it down in writing about what success looks like. And that so I actually this one was a big enough deal that I actually made workbooks for people to do this as a companion to the book. Like, and I don't like I'm not in the author business. I just like somebody had to write this book, and then I realized is getting really clear on what is most important was the most important thing. So if you're clear, as an example, this is a great culture fit. What's going to happen with my employees is a good outcome. I'm happy with what's going to happen with customers. I'm satisfied personally with whatever it means. And that might mean I join a big company and I do the corporate thing for a while. It might mean I get to go away, whatever. Like, I make no moral judgment on what you want. You just got to get clear about what you want. And so I found that if you have clarity on that, a lot of the little stuff that comes up that's irritating, you can kind of move through it, because you go, you know what? These 5 things mattered most, and I'm getting those. And this silly little thing that isn't fair and shouldn't be true, and those, yeah, it's not fair, but it doesn't actually matter.
Yeah.
So that I built these workbooks. They're free. They're on my website, sunnyvanderbeck.com.
Cool.
You just download them, and if you fill them out, it helps a lot with the aggravation.
Beautiful. I'm going to put some links to to your website. I'll throw in your LinkedIn and a few other things on here, and of course the link to Amazon, where people can find your book, Selling Without Selling Out: How to Sell Your Business Without Selling Your Soul, which you'll probably see a new sale coming through for myself, so I'll go and have a look at it as well.
Great.
Sonny, one final question. You talked about defining success. How do you define success now? With all your experience, you've done a lot of different things. You're clearly a successful guy financially and all those things. So, but how do you personally define success now in your life?
Did I leave it better than I found it?
Love
in
it.
everything.
Love it. Sonny, thank you so much for coming on the show. It's been great chatting to you. I loved hearing about your story. You've got a lot of advice to give, and you're out there helping people, which is what we love as well. So appreciate your time, and thanks again.
Hey, great chat. Thanks so much.
Pleasure. And thank you all for listening to another episode of the Buy, Grow, Sell podcast. I hope you enjoyed this as much as I did, and we'll see you on the next episode.